Hi, and welcome to Knife Chats. Today we're going to be talking about a brief introduction to the Colonial Swiss Master series of knives.
Okay, so what I'll be talking about is the Colonial Swiss Master knives. These were made in the USA. Colonial started the series early in the 1970s, and it continued all the way into the 1990s. So easily 20 years that they were making these knives. And obviously, from the name Swiss Master, they were trying to capitalize off of the popularity of Swiss Army knives, which explains why they have the red scales and a little emblem on there that kind of could confuse a person, making them think it was a Swiss Army knife. What I'm going to do when I'm doing this series is take a Swiss Master knife and try and compare it to the closest living relative in the Victorinox or Wenger line. So you'll also see some Victorinox or Wenger knives as I try to compare these knives to it. Now, I'm not trying to compare them in quality or anything. I will tell you right now, these knives use a 420 stainless steel blade throughout the line. Some of the blades were stamped high carbon, but that really was 420 HC or 420 steel. The steel is not comparable in quality. Well, it is comparable in quality to the steel used in a Victorinox, but basically it's a lesser quality steel than what you find in a Victorinox or Wenger knife. What I will also be doing when I'm looking at this series is looking at what knife this was in the Colonial line, because when Colonial made the Swiss Master line, for the most part, they did not introduce any new knives. They basically took old knives in the Colonial line, for instance, the Forest Master here, which is nothing but a four-blade camp knife that had been around since the probably the 1930s or so by Colonial. Put on some red scales, and suddenly it is the Colonial Sportsman. So that's what they did with the series throughout. So in some cases, the knives have nothing to do with anything you'll find in a Swiss Army knife. Some of that's good, some of that's bad. I will also talk about the quality of the knives as I go through the series too. One thing I want to show first off is this is the earliest of these Swiss knives by Colonial, and if you notice, the symbol on it changes rather quickly from what you see later. Here we go. So the early ones had a cross and a shield, and later they put in a Lucerne cross. Notice the difference. Also notice the difference in shade of red. Now the shade of red might be different simply because of fading over time, but the shield obviously changed. And I have a feeling that what happened is early on Colonial was using this shield. This is definitely an earlier one. And someone from Switzerland, probably Victorinox, sent them a nice cease and desist note because that is way too close to this. And so I'm sure some people really complained about it. You can't just go around putting a cross in something and saying Swiss Master knife. It becomes a little too confusing. So I think early on, Colonial was kind of told, you need to change that. And so they went to the Lucerne cross. And the Lucerne cross is what you will find most often on these knives. And you see it on most of the knives I have. Matter of fact, this is the only one I have with the old style shield. So I wanted to show that in the introduction here. Just remember, mostly you will see the Lucerne crosses. You'll also see in this series that the knives were used for other things too. For instance, if we can get this to focus a little better, notice that says Trails In. That is the popcorn sold by the Boy Scouts of America. So the knives were repurposed and used as a gift in the Boy Scouts also. This is actually a Sportsman for the Swiss Master series, but then it becomes a Trails In gift knife for selling enough popcorn. In any case, like I said, this is just the introduction, so I will go into more details on the various knives in this series with future videos. Thanks for watching so far, and I'll keep you posted with ones that are coming out soon.
So if you're ever visiting Switzerland, consider visiting Lucerne, a beautiful town with a beautiful lake and probably great skiing, but no cross. But if you want to continue to learn a little bit about the Swiss Master series of knives, follow this playlist. As always, thanks for dropping by, and remember, you're only as sharp as your knife.